Welcome to the BrettJohnson.biz podcast, where we discuss business on purpose, radically fresh leadership, capital that transforms society, and marketplace stories that embolden difference makers. Well, welcome to the Repurposing Business podcast. I'm Brett Johnson, here today with Jason Fleagle. Jason, great to have you here.
Thank you, Brett. So great to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. This is great. I wish we had 2 or 3 hours over a long cup of tea to dig into this, but we're going to jump into the question of AI and specifically the ethics of AI. How ethical is it, and so forth. So let's just maybe tee this up. Jason, you've done a lot of work, I know, in ChatGPT, which has been hot in the news. And I recall recently Elon Musk was saying, oh, no, we need Truth GPT or we need something else. So the questions of ethics, of bias, of things built into AI that could actually bend the truth or not totally support it and so forth, these are hot topics right now.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, Brett, because I've been doing pretty much a deep dive. I've been in kind of the AI space for 3 or 4 years, doing a lot of different kind of custom software. I do a lot of work in the digital marketing and advertising space too. So I've been experimenting behind the scenes, but when OpenAI released ChatGPT, as you mentioned, it really took the world by storm. It was a really viral thing. And now the average person all around the world is kind of wondering, what is this? What can it do? How do we even respond to it? I think it was 100 million users, Brett, that they got within 2 months, which is the highest user acquisition of any kind of app ever in history. So yeah, a lot of people have concerns, and I think those concerns are very valid actually at this point.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost like 3 months ago, nobody was talking about AI in a big way. I mean, there were some people who were doing it, but even now, in the last week or so, we've seen a senior person at one of the big tech companies resign because he's saying, I just don't like where this is going. And he was one of the fathers of AI. So there are all of these ethical issues and so forth. And that's what we'll dive into, not so much the technology. But before we do that, Jason, just unpack a bit more of your background. I know you were one of the key organizers of the Web3 Christians in Web3 conference, and I know you've been doing things with AI and Web3 technologies. Just unpack your background a bit for us.
Yeah, for sure, Brett. Thank you. Yeah, I'm come from an interesting background, like most of us with our different life journeys, but mostly in the science and medical space. So I actually have 2 degrees. Biology, chemistry is kind of my main focus. I was planning on becoming a physician or a dentist. So I was accepted into medical school and dental school. But at around the same time, I met someone who was in more of the political space. And I befriended them. They were a guest speaker at the university, actually my second year of college. And they were like, would you be interested in an internship with us at one of our think tanks? And I was like, yeah, definitely. And at the same time, I was just accepted into medical school, dental school. And I felt like God was moving me into more of this kind of consulting direction on like, how do you solve social issues or cultural issues, in the world today? So I did a lot of like research for these different groups, but it ultimately came down, Brett, to when I did the research, the different think tanks would be like, oh, can you turn this into like an interactive experience or a presentation on our website? And I didn't know like much software engineering at that time. And I'm like, I got to learn how to use these different tools and technologies. And then as a Christian, I wanted to use it to ultimately better serve Christian organizations and businesses around the world. So that's when I transitioned to software engineering, did a lot of self-taught kind of work, and then eventually online course and certification programs, worked in enterprise software for a while, a lot of agencies doing, software engineering, and then kind of transitioned into more of the content marketing and digital marketing side. So I worked at Abercrombie and Fitch, really well-known retail company around the world. I did a lot of kind of e-commerce software engineering, and then transitioned into the digital marketing side, being like a digital leader of a ghostwriting company, a book writing and ghostwriting company. So we did a lot of work with like John Maxwell and their organization, did a lot of work with the Zig Ziglar organization,
Yeah.
Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. So a lot of kind of personal brand building, writing, online course development. So I was one of the co-creators of the Secrets of Closing the Sale Masterclass. It was with the Ziegler Corporation and Kevin Harrington kind of coming together to share all of this amazing, ethical sales oriented content.
Yeah.
Zig was known, for saying to sell is to serve, and you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. So really putting other people, as the core focus and love. So talk about like a learning experience, just going through all those different things. And then eventually, yeah, I left that group. The founder and I parted ways. And then I started working at other agencies in sales, digital marketing, still consulting on the side, and some of the political and Christian organizations I was working with. And eventually, yeah, I got more into the technical SEO, search engine optimization space. So I did a lot of work in the Bay Area and California. Silicon Valley, I did a lot of work with tech companies, kind of optimizing their search engine traffic. And then eventually, yeah, scaled up my own Catalyst agency, where I do some software architecture. So websites, mobile apps, branding, and then a lot of the digital marketing and growth. So paid advertising, content marketing. And then recently, the last 3 to 4 years, it's been a lot of Web3 projects. So NFT projects, artificial intelligence, which has been really fun, and a lot of marketing automation. So yeah, I really try to break down a lot of complicated or complex things or tools, and show people how you can use and apply these to, get those kind of growth goals that you're looking to get. And then Chat GPT, yeah, I've done a lot of content on YouTube and my own podcast in the past, but recently I've been really focusing on, yeah, this is something that can be a tool if it's used the right way. But also there is some concern of, yeah, I don't like these larger tech companies basically having a monopoly and kind of controlling a lot of the responses of these prompts and what people can kind of see. So that is concerning. And that's, what we'll be talking about more, Brett.
That's right. Yeah. So, Jason, you're well qualified. So thank you very much. And just to frame this a little bit, some of the common concerns that I hear out there is things like security, because for AI to be intelligent, it's got to gather a lot of information. People are worried about surveillance states, as we've seen in different parts of the world. Another one is bias, and I'll just put these problems out there, then we can talk about the solution. So is AI fair? And inherently, it has the bias of people who've loaded this thing up, and so that seems to be an issue. Human interaction, are humans going to lose their interaction, or is this something that's going to foster interaction? I've heard arguments both ways. Well, maybe let's just talk about that before a little bit before we jump into more of the ethical side and the identity side. But on the human interaction, I mean, obviously there's concerns around employment and people's jobs being replaced, to millions of jobs going and so forth. And who has the power? Who has the control? Is it a bunch of smart guys like you who end up running the world? The technocrats or the nerds run the world. But let's talk about the human element first. What's your take, Jason? Do you think this is going to take Zoom interactions to 3D augmented reality? You and I are going to have virtual cup of coffee. I'll be able to smell your coffee. We have a better interaction, or is it going to get worse?
Yeah, I think ultimately at this point, it's kind of like a wild, wild west situation in any state. And you have this at really any stage of early stage of innovation that's happening. I'm looking or thinking of like the development of like the credit card. Yeah. And that a lot of the early builders and tech companies kind of building that solution. Ultimately, it comes down to what is which company has the greatest kind of user value attribution that they can add to that user and also make it like really sticky, like OpenAI, I would argue, is they have created one of this, I keep calling it sticky, but really ultimately what that means is they have an ability to get people onto the platform and keep them there. And they've done it really well, really well, at kind of keeping that going. So I do think I have a fairly positive outlook on, from my perspective on this, that AI can be used as a way to augment what makes humans fantastic, what makes humans, the identity, the whole identity and personhood. I think it really can reinforce that and grow that. But there is also the concern that, we've seen a lot of this kind of surveillance state with big tech companies all around the world. Also, in certain countries around the world, there's also their governments that are, connected to a lot of that data that is being collected, and they can have access to that, which is really concerning. So there are elements of that where I think right now it comes down to who is getting into the space, who's going to build. Like for me, I'm educating and I'm building because as a Christian, as a leader who believes in, strong character, morality, and ethics, I want to be building solutions that ultimately empower people. And I'm encouraging other companies to do the same. And yeah, it comes down to what are some of those elements of what is a free life, because I think AI definitely has the power to be used as a weapon and used to control and manipulate people. But it's, again, that's the idea of a tool. It depends on how you wield it, and who is kind of in the space building. So I do think, yeah, Brett, it's going to be getting to the point. I've been playing around with some really cool like AI video tools. I've seen one recently where it'll scan your face, and yeah, you can basically use AI to kind of talk as your avatar, which is really, it's scary, but also kind of exciting at the same time. And of course, you've probably seen, Brett, maybe some of the people watching or listening too have seen it, where I think it's the Steve Jobs and one of the other leaders, like they have this totally AI, driven conversation. It's not them at all. And yeah, they're talking with one another as these two kind of AI voices. So yeah, I think it can be positive. It just ultimately comes down to keeping it a free market system, and ultimately that being a driving force of, does that user still have the freedom and capability of some of these kind of pillars of like a free society, like free security, like ability to have a personhood, not have the AI kind of tell me how to live my life. And I think the big question, is, will it replace my job? And that's one that a lot of people are talking about. The simple answer is yes, it will. But what does that kind of look like? Will it totally replace, the job, or will it kind of start to augment it? For me, doing a lot of digital marketing, paid advertising, sales, even software development, I use ChatGPT. I use a lot of custom software I've built too, using GPT APIs. And yeah, I use it as a tool to be more efficient and add value and strengthen kind of that value as an expert. So it's changed the way I look at the work from a lot of rudimentary and very, kind of long process of doing the work to being more efficient. And you can also train the chat GPT or other AI engines on you're doing reinforcement learning. So thankfully, over the last, 10, 12 years, I've developed a lot of these consulting processes. Probably you the same, Brett, with the work that you do. And I've been feeding that in to chat GPT and also the API kind of playground where it's more secure than the typical chat GPT. And I can train these different threads, these prompts, to actually output those awesome responses given a client project or a work project. So that's a good example there where it changes the way that you do work, but it's not a total replacement at this moment. So I think there is going to be some kind of shakeup there, but it's everyone's kind of wondering what that is, Brett.
So at a simple level for our listeners, if you take something like calendaring, calendaring and email are things that haven't changed for ages. I remember years ago thinking, man, I would love to have a different email interface, which would then sift through my email as I taught it. So as they came in, my idea was simply, in comes the email, and you just toss it into different in trays, if you like, or categories, right? Well, with AI, it'll learn that pretty quickly, so that it'll go through, and instead of just having a spam filter, it's actually elevating things, prioritizing things. Now, there's AI type software that's not necessarily doing that with email, but certainly with calendaring. It'll look at your tasks, see what's coming up, and the promise is you're going to have to work less, or it's like a virtual assistant, but even color coding your priorities, and maybe for teams putting them into Kanban or Gantt charts and so forth. So I guess there is the promise of better work, not just replacing work. Yeah, it's replacing, if it's replacing dumb work with smart work, hey, then one should be up for that.
Yeah.
But if it's replacing your manufacturing job, we've already been through that with robots, but it's like the next level, the customer service job or whatever it might be. I mean, we might have to all go back to being hairdressers or Abercrombie and Fitch models like you were.
Yes. Well, that you bring up a really important point there, Brett, because you look again at examples throughout history as like a model. And when the electric light bulbs were coming and becoming more commonplace, there was a lot of concern on, hey, these kerosene lamp lighters, at night that would go out, they were paid to light those lamps. They're like, what am I going to do? I'm without a job. And, like the horse-drawn carriage drivers, they were like, oh, the automobile's here. But ultimately they adapted to those changes that were happening. And that's where, for me, I'm trying to do more of that, is showing people these changes are coming. Now, how do we adapt to it before that kind of total change happens, So, and a lot of things like that, I mentioned the credit card kind of processing that too, is like, a lot of people are like, I don't want, this piece of plastic to be able to do that. That's really scary. It's concerning. It's not safe and secure. So, but that comes down to a responsibility of more of the technical oriented people, the builders, people who recognize that, to build these solutions the right way, and ultimately, help empower people rather than kind of control and manipulate them. And then there are these people that, the education side of things is going to be really important. How do you adapt to, a lot of these new tech developments and everything happening?
Jason, it seems that the AI push is causing society to ask some age-old questions. And, Proverbs or Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. So it's like society's been through this before. But three big questions. One is, who am I? What's my character? What's my identity? What is truth? And then what is right? Where do we get our ethical framework from? And so maybe we could dig into those three things and unpack this question of character and identity. Why is it important to settle character and identity so you don't get sideswiped? Or how is AI resurfacing this question of character and identity?
Yeah, it brings up, it's actually really interesting, because I think this is forcing us, like you said, to really start to ask these questions again. A lot of people are kind of struggling with that idea of like identity and their character development, because so many people place their identity in their work that they do. So that's going to be a really big change. Now, as Christians, we understand that, God created the world. We are God-breathed, created individuals ourselves. So there's an inherent personhood and identity, a relationship between God and his creation there that gives us like a purpose to life. The other side of that, which is concerning, is, who is saying how we are created? Because if that's like OpenAI, for example, there have been calls that for concern of the bias, like, oh, if we're talking about Christianity or what's called ontology, the idea of personhood and understanding like where we came from, how do we understand that? OpenAI can ultimately dictate what people see in that when they're searching for identity and things like that. So I think that ultimately gives Christians, though, an opportunity to step up and out and say, hey, this is a biblical worldview on the understanding of character in identity and how we have this inherent identity and a purpose of our life. And it's not tied to AI. It's not tied to the work that we do. It's ultimately tied to the relationship that we have with Jesus Christ. And then everything else kind of flows from that. And even just saying that, you have a deeper piece on kind of what's coming with
Mm.
the AI development, because our identity and character is not rooted in an AI tool, ultimately. It's
Yeah.
also concerning on, the other side, people searching for that character and identity. I think, again, an opportunity for us to step out and say, hey, here is something, that's different that we do believe is based in truth.
Mm. So, Jason, one of my concerns is that we're in an era where work is under attack. So, with the great resignation, quiet quitting, people walking away from their job saying, yeah, I want to work for purpose and for something meaningful, but I'm out of here. They're checking out. And COVID seemed to underline that.
Yeah.
Is AI going to make that worse? Or
Mm.
is it going to give people tools to say, I could actually now do something meaningful? My work does have purpose, but I don't have to do dumb work. I can do meaningful work. Which way do you see it going?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I see it reinforcing a lot of the independent workers
Yeah.
to improve their efficiency. For me, I'm a really driven individual. So like remote work and hybrid working, I did that over 10 years now, or more. So I've always been a driven individual. For other people who like need an office setting or something to go in and they need kind of oversight, it's a really different situation, because there is this high, like you said, the rise of quiet quitting and just the great resignation. People are really starting to check out. I do see it as still this kind of split that's going to be happening. There's going to be a core kind of group where it's going to start to fall into, this is my opinion. We'll kind of timestamp this, Brett, and see, looking back in the future. But I do think the group that is doing more of the great resignation, the quiet quitting, there's a few reasons of that. Some of them are burnt out, but a lot of it is like this acceleration is happening so quickly. I think that's going to be the group that falls into the ones calling for like a universal basic income. They're
Yeah.
going to be ones that are going to be like, I don't want to do anything at all. I want, to be paid this amount of money for just living, in this society. And then the other side is going to be, wow, these AI tools are so empowering. How can I use this to be more efficient to get my basic kind of work done that will then free me up to be more creative and create more solutions that are going to help people? So it's really kind of highlighting that entrepreneurial kind of spirit. So I do see it kind of creating a greater divide between, the rich versus poor, the haves, the have-nots.
Yeah.
That's really concerning, though. Again, coming back to like control and manipulation, who controls that data that you're seeing?
Yeah.
Because like for me, building a data set, I could easily start to build this data set with this other group on, this side and say, oh, I'm controlling, their responses with all of their prompts that they're putting in and kind of controlling their next decisions, because people are being totally reliant then on AI. So I do see it kind of,
Yeah.
the split that's
Mm.
happening, Brett.
So you think it's going to put the entrepreneurs on steroids? It's going to be steroids for the entrepreneurs, but for the people that are more inclined to say, well, let the technocrats rule the World Economic Forum stuff. You'll own nothing. You'll be happy. And you'll all just get something, and the system will dish it out evenly. If you've got that worldview, you're in danger of it becoming a drug versus a steroid.
That's right. Exactly. I do think that they're in that second kind of category. There is, in the current time that we're at right now, there's this large population, which is the average person that's like, oh, they might be an employee, or they might be an entrepreneur. They might have their own business, or even freelancing or consulting, solo entrepreneur. And they're just like trying to figure out what is happening and then what to do about it. And I think that is, again, kind of they're ultimately trying to decide which kind of category to kind of go in, or where they'll fall.
Yeah.
I think it ultimately also comes down to, yeah, the companies embracing this AI technology. Just because I'm more in the tech and entrepreneurial space myself, I'm a part of a
Mm.
lot of business and tech online groups. And I can't tell you how many new AI tools are springing up
Yeah,
overnight because of, yeah, these entrepreneurs embracing the technology. And the
right.
big companies, I mean, you've seen with Microsoft forming the partnerships with OpenAI, like even the big, very big enterprise companies are getting involved in the space. So
Right.
it's here kind of whether we like it or not. It's just
Correct.
as an average employee, yeah,
Yeah.
what is that response
Mm.
to everything that's happening?
Yeah.
I don't personally agree with like a universal basic income. I
Yeah.
do think it comes down to ultimately it's not the hours, that you put into a job. It's not, a project base. It's what is that value and kind of connecting that value to a monetary value,
Yeah.
that you're delivering. There's a famous saying, you probably know it, Brett, but it's a really highly skilled consultant comes in to a company and they're like, how much is it to do, this? And he's like, it's $25,000. And he comes in, he does it, fixes the problem like in 10 minutes. And
Yeah.
they're like, whoa, I don't want to pay you $25,000. He's like, no, you're paying me for the 15 to 20 some years to become that
Yeah.
expert because I added the value. I
Right.
think that example right there is it's not based on the time, it's based on, that what is ultimately are you doing for
Yeah.
value?
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. So, Jason, let's just assume for the moment that we're made to co-create with God. So we're made creative. We love it when we're creative, whether we know God or not. We have a desire to create things. We we carry that image. Would you say that AI gives us a new set of tools to co-create?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely would say that. I've never seen, even just in all of history, learning about it, these, the stages of tech innovation that have happened,
Mm,
business innovation that have happened throughout the years. I've never seen it be at this level.
mm,
You're almost, and this is why it excites me personally, because you're able to neurologically our brains are only able to process so much information like at any given time. There's so much subconscious kind of processing that happens,
yeah.
but now with AI you can actually train your data set
Mm,
to understand your thought processes on these different kind of categories.
yeah.
Like for me, I have like 45 to 50 different kind of threads in Chat GPT that I've trained it on. Oh, this is like fictional story writing for more of the branding elements that I do when I work with companies. This is more of the paid advertising. So you're actually training this to be a very highly specific kind of expert. It's taking your brain and kind of duplicating it in a way to reinforce what you do and what you do really well. So I
Mm,
do see that as a really powerful augmentation
yeah.
of, yeah, the creative tools,
Right.
way more than just the basic kind of computer that we've had. Even, I'm thinking of like Steve Jobs when he took what was Xerox, with the mouse, and
Yeah.
at the time people were like, why would you need a mouse? We've got the
Right.
keyboard to do all the key. So
Yeah.
things like that is like, why do we need an AI? Well, it's
Right.
going to become commonplace to use it as a creative tool. And
Yeah.
when you think about too, Brett, I think both you and I in consulting definitely understand this. What are some of those pillars of the greatest consultants? It's
Yeah.
usually asking the right questions and
Correct.
listening. And
Correct.
that's where AI being able to ask the right questions and it's listening to you and learning from that and adapting,
Yeah.
that's really powerful. But then it comes back to, yeah, who owns that data set? Who controls those response to those prompts that you're putting out? Is that OpenAI? Is that Google, with their Google Lambda data set? Or is that Christians that understand tech and want to build their own data set? Like that's my goal. I want to have my own data set eventually to provide to Christian businesses and organizations to maintain that freedom. A lot of other people kind of, yeah, are in the same agreement. They're like, oh, that's really concerning. Does OpenAI control everything? Does Google? So I think it's going to be a situation of, yeah, let the free market kind of decide, but the
Mm.
builders, it's time now for the leaders to kind of step up and get involved in the space. Otherwise, yeah, things are going to keep moving forward, and it's not going to be a situation that you like eventually if you're not involved.
Well, that raises the problem almost of wealth inequality and who benefits. Because right now you've got big companies, you've got Apple, Google,
Yeah.
Microsoft. You mentioned big names who can throw, billions of dollars at thing, and then you've got Jason Fleagle sitting in Florida,
That's
and
right.
it doesn't have the same amount of money,
That's
and
right.
so by definition, do you think that the if we can have this big tech problem all over again, or do you
Mm.
see more a democratization of truth, knowledge, wisdom?
Yeah. I think that there's going to be a situation of trying to democratize truth and information, whether that's from a biblical worldview or not. That's concerning.
Hmm.
So I think it's definitely going to be happening. These, like you talk about, character identity, like morality, what is truth? Because you
Hmm.
hear that a lot today,
Yeah.
in especially in media and entertainment. It's
Hmm.
really bad, here in the States, compared to
Yeah.
other international locations. Maybe
Yeah.
China is a little bit worse, but
Yeah.
the idea of, yeah, this is my truth. Oh,
Hmm.
this is your truth. No,
Hmm.
we know, with philosophy that there is absolute truth, but
Right.
then our opinions are based on, yeah, what we look at and reference from this absolute truth.
Hmm.
That's a lot of people, and we're kind of being reinforced today, over probably, I'd argue, like the last 70 to 80 years, to kind of move away from some of these basic understandings of, like, yeah, reality, who we are as people.
Hmm.
So that's going to happen. It's just, I do see it as an opportunity for Christians to get more involved in the space and speak up and say, no, this is a biblical worldview. These
Yeah.
are some of the answers to the questions based on, yeah, what you're asking. So,
Yeah.
like, this idea of an AI counselor, even like, a biblically based AI counselor, like helping people, guide them through these conversations on, like, I just lost my job, AI replaced me. Like, what do I do? And helping them kind of guide that. That's
Right.
an example of a really powerful example of it, how AI can be used with the biblical worldview to help people kind of adapt, to these situations.
Yeah. Now, Jason, some people might get scared with the language, a biblical worldview and a Christian worldview that's influencing AI. But I've looked at various things. For example, there's the Makula Center for Applied Ethics down in San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, you have to look at this all through lenses.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moral rights lens, like because humans have dignity.
Yeah,
Well, that's not an anti-biblical proposition. That's a biblical proposition. Or you've got to
that's
look
right.
at it from a perspective of justice, because everybody should have their own due. Well, that's another biblical foundation. God's not a respecter of persons.
That's
Or
right.
it's got to be utilitarian. It's got to have a fair impact for everybody. Well, fairness is, I mean, that's built in. It's a biblical construct. It's something
Yeah,
written in scripture. It's got to be for the common good.
that's
So,
right.
so it's almost like these big ethics philosophers departments are coming up with love your neighbor as yourself. And then there's a whole lot of things which they call virtue. Look at it through the lens of
Yeah,
virtue, and which can be summed up as the fruit of the spirit: love, joy, peace,
that's right.
patience, kindness, self-control. They'll add a few things, fidelity, integrity, fairness. I mean, these are out of their language. These, what
Mm-hmm.
they call good virtues for society.
Yeah, that's right.
And then what they also call care ethics, which is, it shouldn't break down a relationship.
Mm,
Well, that's another fundamental biblical
right.
thing. We're made for a relationship with each other, and we're made for a relationship with God. So people are searching now. So that seems to me to create an opportunity to get back to what is truth. Are there core foundational truths
Mm-hmm.
that apply across society? And I know that you
Yeah.
you think that this is a topic, right?
Yeah, it's because I immediately jumped to, I'm a huge fan of apologetics, Brett, understanding what you believe and why you believe it, and being
Yes.
able to communicate that to other people in these kind of, conversations, open forums even. Yeah, it comes down to a lot of, like, I think of Friedrich Hayek, very well known, economist and a philosopher as well. one of my favorite philosophers as well. I'm also from the economic side, Edward von Mises. He has a lot of this kind of understanding of ethical, like what are some of those basic ethical structures that we should have in a society, and a free market economic structure too, and how does the average person fit into that? And it is a lot of what you described. It's like ability to have access to love and compassion, like human dignity, justice, integrity. You said some of those, but also, on the economic side, like private property rights, open competition, like access to a supply and demand that's free and open. Not that the government controls that, having a centralized kind of control. So it also gets into some of the Web3, blockchain philosophies as well, where I do see that as a huge power couple with Web3 and blockchain and AI coming together to protect and prevent some of this, probably this manipulation and control that's happening. But what you said and what I just said, that's all really kind of surface level information. People want, and whether they realize that they want it or not, they're like, what is the foundation to those principles? And then that it actually comes out of biblically rooted principles. So I think it's from the perspective of Christians should not jump out and say, oh, this is wrong and this is why it's wrong. It's, oh, we are for, and we talk about these kind of fundamental principles, but then when it gets deeper, we explain where that comes from. It's just like on my channel, on my YouTube or my podcast, when I talk about AI, I don't come out and say AI is going to destroy the world, or open AI is going to, destroy the world, even though I do have some of those kind of concerns. But I talk about how it can be used the right way, because it's just like anything. I think about Moses, at the burning bush, when God said, what do you have in your hands?
Right.
And we're being asked the same question with like Web3 and AI now. Like ultimately, it's personal responsibility. Like what is that personal calling with our own character and identity? And as Christians, how can we speak into it? And it's from a place of love. We talked about Zig Ziglar early on. Sales, the act of sales, was a very sleazy and slimy business. And then Zig, a strong Christian, came in and he's like, no, it's not about being selfish. It's about how can I help that other person that I'm talking to get what they want? And then ultimately, I'm going to be served through that, by being paid a commission or being paid money. So that's really where it turned it on its head. And I think it comes back to that fundamental principle. How can AI be used for love? And then pull out everything else from that. So that's kind of, Brett, how I break it down.
Okay, good. That's very, very good. You raised an interesting point, though, that for the last 70 years, we've bought into this notion that you can't know truth. Truth is relative. And in the last 5 years, well, Jason, it's your version of the truth. If you think you're a butterfly, or whatever it might be.
Yes.
So, and now we're confronted. AI is almost like a bucket of cold water over your head, like the ice bucket challenge, which says, oh my gosh, so is all truth relative? Is because if it is, we're in serious trouble with AI. If all truth is it's just relative, it's wishy-washy, it's Jason's truth, or it's this one's truth, or it's that one's truth. We might say the Chinese Communist government, if it's their truth, you're in trouble. But equally, if it's a Republican truth or a Democrat truth, there's got to be a bigger truth. Otherwise, we're susceptible to manipulation.
That's right.
It's almost like a big wake-up call.
Yeah, that's right.
To rethink, this age-old question: what is truth?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's interesting because I think at this stage, Brett, it's like there has to be a leader / a group of leaders that come together. I kind of see it as like an almost like a Clapham circle, like William Wilberforce and William Pitt, and how they formed a lot of these Christian leaders coming together to ultimately, most people know that story. They ultimately helped reform slavery, so many of these other prisons, and the fair treatment of animals, but it was all being Christian leaders. Like, what are some of those foundational principles of just living a free life, but also the personhood like how do we treat people the right way? And I think at this stage that we're at with AI going to be such a global like change agent, that's the same kind of situation we're in that we should have. So it provides an opportunity to kind of create like a protocol for here's the ethical treatment, you know, of humans all around the world. And then how does that look like in a collective society? So that's something I'm really excited about. And, you know, Brett, I don't know if I kind of want to talk about it, but there's a lot of people, talking about like maybe doing a Christian kind of AI summit. Like bringing leaders together. How can we go through and talk about some of these discussions? So that's something I've been working on behind the scenes. I don't know, Brett, if you
no, that would be fantastic. So I know we'll put in the show notes over here just a link to, so people can indicate whether they would be interested.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me, Jason, you would be able to use AI to summarize the results, to synthesize the results from which inferences can be made in the future. So it's almost like we could have I don't want to say a spiritual audit of AI, but we could have foundational principles for AI that when somebody is creating a new tool, might be a calendaring tool, or it might be something that's going to diagnose and dispense healthcare meds or whatever it might be, or make a legal decision.
That's right.
That it has to meet these ethical standards.
That's right.
Yeah, so that sounds fascinating. So we'll put
it's kind of in typical, like I've done a lot of work in the Web3 space, Brett, and you know, a lot of the cryptocurrency tokens, NFT projects, even just blockchain-based projects. There's a lot of auditing firms out there, and they go through, these are the fundamental checklists of things that you need to have to be, you know, like a trustworthy kind of project. And again, all of those items are clearly outlined. That's what I really do see as kind of this next step. And that's where I think that summit could lay some of that foundation of that, where, it's like this protocol where, these different tools are being talked about, or even we look at the existing tools through that lens and kind of have this, rating factor and this trustworthy, kind of factor, trustworthiness kind of factor on those different tools. And it also gives us an opportunity to, decide which projects, which organizations to be a part of. And then it pulls back some of the answers to those questions, the age-old questions. What is identity? What is personhood? And then what are some of these fundamental ethic, principles?
No, it can be done. It takes a bit of thought. I remember years ago when I was looking at a comparison of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic finance, and saying, well, if they're all claiming to be faith-based finance, is there some set of things which would be characteristics of faith-based financing products? And I came up with just 10. And if you have these 10 things, then that's great. And if you don't, then you don't really have a faith-based financing product. You just, it doesn't matter whether you're selling it to Christians or to Muslims or to Jews or to this cause or that cause, because we are in an era of the spiritualization of capital. But you can come up with some, and it doesn't have to be 53 things. It can be a fairly clearly defined set. So I think it can be done, and we have to do the homework and do it early on. So I like the idea of your summit, and I'd be a happy participant in that.
I'd love to have you as a speaker, Brett.
Thank you. I'd love to go back to something, because one of the other things that we've seen not just is the erosion of truth and it's your truth and relative truth and so on. My other concern, Jason, has been among younger people, and that is this question of, and you're in branding, right? So this is in your space, but you are the brand. And I see Christian people who love Jesus, who are spending an inordinate amount of time packaging themselves on social media. You know, the Instagram reels, there's TikTok things. And so I don't even know how much time it goes in. And I've spoken to a lot of them, and they're like, it's a competitive space, because if I'm a Christian guy or a gal, I've got to show how much I'm working out at the gym, what my career prospects look like, how cute I am, the fun life I'm having. Doesn't matter. Is AI going to make all of that worse? Or are we now going to just put that problem on steroids?
I think the way I'm kind of seeing it is AI is a reinforcement engine for some of the fundamental outlook of like how we think about life right now.
Mm.
So like for me, I understand, absolute truth. I understand my character, my identity, where that's rooted. I have an understanding of morality, right and wrong, and AI reinforces a lot of that. But for people who don't have that, AI reinforces, yeah, this ambiguity. It reinforces like surface level kind of relationship building, a lot of the selfish kind of desires of like a typical, yeah, quote unquote, social media influencer, which I guess I would kind of be in that category. But I think, yeah, it can be a powerful tool if, yeah, you use it the right way. Now, for me, I would spend 15 to 20 hours a week doing social media content, especially like email. And when I was doing a lot of blog post writing, now with ChatGPT, I've brought that down to, yeah, 3 to 4 hours a week. And that's
Okay, so
including a
you
lot of
are
YouTube.
realistically saving time. And do you think
That's right.
that so it's going to reinforce whatever cracks there are in your foundation are going to be more visible, but if there is strength there and there's good things it can do that. So
Yeah.
but I guess we're going to have to learn how to train our AI tools to represent what we truly believe in,
That's right.
so forth. And
That's right.
is that a big job to be able to even head in that direction?
Yeah, that's a good question. It can be complicated depending on how far you want to take it. And what I mean by that is like OpenAI's ChatGPT. A lot of people have used it or have heard about it at least, and that's either GPT 3.5 or GPT 4 now, and that means that's a data set. It's something that they've collected over many years on the internet, like a bunch of bulk knowledge. And then as a data set, as you use it, it actually reinforces how you're using it. So you can reinforce it in different ways. Google has Google Lambda. There's I don't know, probably 30 to 40 different like fairly large AI data sets that are open source. IBM, with Watson, where it was doing that chess game, that was pretty popular, I think 5 or 6 years ago. So the idea there, though, is it is a reinforcement engine based on what data set you're referencing. So to create like a GPT 3.5 or a GPT 4, that's a lot of money, a lot of time. Like you were saying, enterprise, like, it'll be many years before OpenAI sees a payback for the amount of money they're spending right now for those users. But ultimately, it comes down to, any free product. If there's a free plan, usually that means you're the product. So in that Chat GPT, we're all kind of, the paid product. But that's a good example of they've trained it over many, many years. However, there are open source AI data sets that you can take and kind of train it and reinforce it. It's just not as strong as an output of like what you would get with a Chat GPT kind of like interface. So, and if you want to try to train something basic, like super basic, I would recommend using OpenAI's GPT data sets to reinforce like actually your opinion or how you want to train it. So I have trained it on different use cases. I actually did a video on Jesus GPT. I fed in, different prompts and things like what would Jesus say in response to some of these different like very difficult life questions, like why did my mom, die, or some of these kind of really tough questions. So you can train the thread within ChatGPT to a certain extent, or you can train the API. That's pretty simple to do. You can do that in a day, or, the API might take like a week or two to kind of get it right. But if you want a full-blown data set, that's going to take a long time and a good amount of financial resources to do that, which I think is essential for Christians to have moving forward, is having, another solution, but not just to say that this is a Christian version. I would argue, it comes into play of this is, a character-driven and ethical-driven kind of protocol that these AI data sets subscribe to, or kind of they're analyzed through that kind of lens, if that makes sense.
So Jason, over the centuries, millions of dollars have been poured into something like the translation of scripture into different dialects and languages. Do you see people of faith coming together to say, here's an ethical data set, do you think, or is this too big a problem? Or do you think people will rise up and say, okay, this is worthwhile. I may not know Jesus from Adam, but it doesn't matter. I'm interested enough in an ethical, in a fair, in a reasonable data set based on absolute truth, not relative mumbo jumbo. Do you see that coming about?
I definitely see it coming about. I think at this point, whoever kind of gets there first and starts to figure out a good framework for that, like protocol, basically, is going to be the leader in the space. So I think at this point, even ChatGPT, there were a lot of people reaching out to me when I started doing things. They're like, this is biased, like, you shouldn't be using this. And I'm like, it really is a reinforcement learning tool. So if you're feeding it actually different things that are like anti-Christian, or, in some cases, whatever that bias that you're saying, it's going to create more responses reinforcing that. So that's what some people, I don't think, really learned early on, is actually the more you use ChatGPT and feed it, it's going to reinforce some of these positions that you have.
Right.
So for me, I haven't come across a lot of this bias that a lot of other people have, because I've trained it to ask these kind of right questions and then kind of going in these different directions. So prompt engineering is something that is pretty common, or what it's becoming called now is, how do you engineer your prompts to kind of reinforce this AI like thread in ChatGPT the right way? So that's a good starting point, where I don't think like OpenAI, I don't think Google Lambda is going to come outright and say, we have this bias on these particular things, because that goes against, our terms and conditions. That's a typical Web 2 kind of big tech answer right now. It goes against terms and conditions. That will be coming, though, is if more and more people use OpenAI, at any point they can say, no, any of these keywords we will not allow in a prompt response. And you actually do see that a good amount in GPT-4, when scammers and hackers were trying to use ChatGPT to create, malware and malicious software, to basically hack people, or hack, because it can write full software and everything now. So I think at this point, there is still more of this openness on people being allowed to use it from all different perspectives. But that's where, if AI then becomes reinforcing these people without this understanding of absolute truth and character and morality and ethics, then that's only going to exacerbate this lack of that. It's a black hole, and it's a hole there, and something has to fill that void, if that makes sense.
I remember once reading a book called The Shentung Compound. I don't know if you came across it, and it was there was when Japan invaded China, they threw a bunch of the foreigners and they put them in a compound. And so they got a bunch of missionaries and other people, university professors. And now they had to come up with rules for how their society was going to work, which was quite interesting. And it's an interesting book from the perspective of, well, we're in a new world. It's got borders around it, but we are going to have to make up the rules for how things work over here and how that evolved. It was quite interesting. And in fact, the famous Chariots of Fire guy, Eric Liddell, was interned there. And he worked with the youth, because the parents were spending all their time, the adults, how do we make society work? And the teenagers were running wild. They had their own parallel society. And so he worked with them, and sadly, he died there from an illness just before everything was released. But we're at that point about how does society work again? Things are getting disrupted, and we're either going to step into it early on and decide, who am I? What's my character? What's my real identity? What is truth? And where do I get my ethics from? Is it just flavor of the month? Or do we have to say, no, if we leave it open, we are going to be subject to the manipulation of big companies for profit, big governments for control, or just wealthy people for their own ego interests, whatever it might be. So I better get my own personal understanding of who I am, what I believe, what is right and wrong. And AI seems to be underlying all of that. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's definitely a fair summary. I think reinforcing a lot of that, like it becomes this duplication of like our brains in a digital format. That's actually a big area of research, is like how, because you can do that in code, but you can't duplicate consciousness yet. So that's the big, I think the next, like that's what a lot of people don't understand when these updates and these tech kind of platforms are released, is we're seeing things that they've been working on for the last 4 to 5 years. Imagine what they're working on now that we don't know about. And that's where you talked about Elon Musk, calling for a pause, and this big AI leader leaving from one of the big tech companies. That's typically a good indication of, okay, we're already experiencing this acceleration of what we know. They're leaving because they're working on what's coming in the next 3 to 5 years. And that's where we're at now. I'm doing this kind of call to action, because those changes are happening, and they're happening pretty quickly. So it is a reinforcement of that. And I definitely think there is kind of this timeline for us as Christians, or even just not as Christians, but people who believe in more of these free market economics, the idea of having a personal identity and freedom, human autonomy, ability to decide how I want to live my life, and not like a government influence. I think that's going to be really timely for us to stand up and say, here's a protocol, or here's a data set that we want to build. There's other people in the existing kind of ecosystem that's forming who will want to do the same. So it's kind of this like AI arms race, Brett, that we're in right now. And like you said, we're going up against really large enterprise companies versus us scrappier kind of people that are just building these different things with the resources that we have. But I think this collective nature is going to be really powerful moving forward, with bringing people together to kind of come together to build these different projects.
Right. Well, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I look forward to participating, and we'll put out there the interest. Right now, it's not a set date, but it's, if you're interested in having an online discussion about AI ethics, these topics that we've bridged today, then we'd love to have people participate with us. So, Jason, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you so much for having me on. If there's any questions, people can find me on social media. I'd be glad to answer them. I've done a lot, on my YouTube channel for response to AI and different things. So if you're curious, feel free to check that out too.
So how did they find you?
So easiest thing is to go to YouTube and type in my name, Jason Fleagle. It's Fleagle like a bagel. So type in that name, and then also, Brett, I can provide you with my social media links if you want to add those into the show notes too. But I'm excited. I think this is an opportunity, not a doom and gloom kind of situation for all of us.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jason. Great chatting with you.
Thanks, Brett.